I woke to frightening screaming. My eyes opened to find the church engulfed in fiery flames, scattering inside on the roof, and the walls outside the windows on fire on the wooden beams. People began to panic and scream, gathering as many things as they could, as well as their children. Sparks rained down above and the church groaned. I sat up and peered outside to see the fire was worse, engulfing the bright city, and now the fields in front of us. I could hear the horses scream in the back stables. My father ushered me with his cane. "Son, get up now! Get the horses! We're fleeing to the harbor!" My mother was already grabbing our bags along with my father, who hobbled toward the church doors, but it was getting packed with people trying to escape. Maria was crying and sucking her thumb as she bobbled in Mary's arms. I slipped on my cloak and hat and began to run toward the church doors, dragging Mary by the hand as she carried my little sister. "Hurry!" Mary screamed. But the people were shoving us past, jumping and smashing the windows with lecterns and old chairs. The glass shattered on the cobbles to jump through to make their flight to another hell. I watched Mary finally push past with Maria and burst into the fields, and I could smell the burnt grass from the flames scorching the fields and smoke welling into the night sky. My mother struggled with the leather bags in her hands, and her dress was burnt from smoke. My father had gathered his maps and chests of gold, but was struggling to carry it due to his hurt leg. "Hal, help your father!" my mother yelled. "Son, I cannot carry this chest entirely on my own. My leg! Ugh! Help, carry the gold!" I bounded forward but heard the building creak and the wooden beams fly down, creating a boulder-sized pieces of wood. I shielded my head and watched the ash and fire flurries rain down. The wooden pieces smashed, breaking 2 pews, but missed us thankfully. "Hal!" my father yelled to beckon forward, but the flames now ran across the stone pews, blocking my mother and father from me and their way out. I tried to jump the flamed wall, but the heat was too intense and threatened to scorch my skin. It hissed like a demon. "Son, go! Just go!" he pleaded, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave my family to the flames. "My sweet, you must flee with your sister. Take Mary and Maria and make it to your aunt in Wales. I love you both and your sister. We will see you in heaven," my mother wailed. "Henry, the church is about to fall!" I heard Mary scream from behind. Timbers piled onto the pews. "I can't!" I yelled in fear. "Henry!" My father's voice boomed over all the other screams. We met eyes across the flames and he nodded. "You can do this, son. It'll be all right." Suddenly the bell from the tower broke from its ropes before they burned away. I heard the bell bang and ring its way down, and I jumped back just in time before it crashed down on top of my mother and father. I barely noticed the priest Thomas trapped behind them, and the shock of the impact took his head clean off, leaving a fountain of blood on his neck stump. The impact of the metal sent out a blaring ring into my ears, sending me flying through the double doors and the chest of gold my father held. The coins flew out into the air and glinting in the moonlight. I bounced onto the grass and watched Mary clutching Maria run up to me as I watched her upside down as my ears blared and rang. That was it. I had lost everything. My father, my mother, gold, my maps, everything. Our way to a new life. I gazed through the burned church and saw the bell had crushed my parents' skulls to puddles of brains and blood. Then from around the corner of the church, the gravedigger, Mr. Stonemoss, troweled at a speed as much as his old knees could, holding 2 iron shovels that were dirty. He looked at the church in flames and looked at me and aimed the shovel at me. "Laddie, you forgot your shovel!" A wooden beam broke off from the side of the building and crushed Mr. Stonemoss like a pancake, making blood, guts, and bones spew in every direction. Both his hands were cut off and they flew towards me. They tumbled into the grass, still gripping both shovels in his dirty fingernails hands, and they twitched. At that point, I was gone. I could not bear to look at it and vomited on the grass before Mary scooped me up in my tears. "They're dead, Mary! They're dead!" I sobbed. As I cried, I peered through the flames inside the church to see the ghostly woman laughing, but no sound came out of her lips, and the flames around her swirled. It was her. She did this. She created the fire of London. She murdered my father and mother. As we met eyes in horror, I saw something change. She then tried to warn me of something. From behind, a body transformed into a horrible nightmare of charred flesh, curling scimitars for horns that were flaming red, a pointed nose and dripping bloody lips and white fangs and sharp claws. Its feet appeared to be of a deer's and hooves clamped the stone floor. I watched in terror at the devil before me. Then the timbers of the building then crumbled and flew towards her. It frowned at me, looked up, and was smashed by a splatter of ash and dust and gone forever. I sighed with relief that this creature was gone, but it did not lighten the loss I felt.
I know, my sweet. I know, but we must flee to the harbor like they said. Hurry! Ships are leaving!
Through welled eyes, I could see the survivors making their way down to the city that was still burning in the night. I nodded, pressed my face against my sister's.
What is happening, Hal?
She asked, knowing she was only scared of the sound of fire.
I'll tell you later, my little pumpkin. Mary and I will take care of you now, alright? We must make way to the funny ships. It's an adventure like a game.
I smiled, trying to force the most recent death of my mother and father from my mind. I'm sorry, father and mother, but I promise I shall continue on for you and take care of her. I took up the reins of the horse that had escaped the stables from the burning gates and climbed up into the saddle. I pulled Mary into my saddle behind me and she held Maria in her blankets. We had nothing, no clothes, money, or weapons. I had lost my sword in the fire that my father had gifted me, sadly, for I had unbuckled it while sleeping. I watched the church towers crumble and fall into itself, and the timbers rained down like freshly minted coins. The tower hit the ground with a boom, and sparks and ash flurried around it as the rest of the church stood perched in flame. The horse screamed and I kicked it forward, bounding past the people down the dirt path towards the burning fire.
He rode through the streets of the city, down from his hill on high. All the winds and the steps and the cobbles, he rode to a woman's side. For she was a secret treasure, she was his shame and his bliss, and a chain and a keep are nothing compared to a woman's kiss. For hands of gold are always cold, but a woman's hands are warm. For hands of gold are always cold, but a woman's hands are warm.
Before he knew it, we bursted through the London city. Shops, taverns, brothels, churches were aflame, and the heat from the houses were so unbearable it seemed to singe our clothes and the horses' fur. Buildings rumbled under the flames and fallen debris of glass and timber laid on the soot-covered cobbles. Dead burnt bodies lined the streets. I could see water buckets left for it was given up and useless to put out the fires. The fire soon took hold quickly around us and a chimney of bricks collapsed, smashing just behind our horse. Strong east winds spread the flames further, jumping from house to house like jumping the wind. The wind blew ash and soot to my eyes and face, making it hard to see. The fire swept through with a warren of streets lined with houses, the upper stories of which almost touched across the narrow winding lanes. I saw dead dogs and meat remains in the worn-down gutters, and all sorts of debris collapsed into the streets. Carriages were ransacked and left, with some horses shot and killed by their owners for food. I felt the horse's strength was about to give in, and began to stumble over the hooves. "Come on, gal! Come on, mush!" I jammed my boot heels into her, and she sped forward down the road. I heard the groaning of a huge treasury wall, plummeting with the flying glass and wood. "Whoa!" Mary screamed. I saw it and hauled the reins to the left, trying to avoid the flying debris, and Mary shielded Maria with her arms while she still gripped the back cloak as my hair flapped behind me. The wall smashed and scattered to the ground in broken pieces, and the wind from it nearly blew me off the horse, but I held on. As the fire raged on, Our horse pounded down the narrow alleyways, avoiding the flames scoring our sides. I watched people try to leave the city and pour down to the river Thames in an attempt to escape by boat, but even the water was on fire. The horse's breath was at its limit. People were scattering across the streets in floods, picking up fallen gold, paper, anything they could salvage, and people were jumping from their windows, cutting themselves on the windows for there was blood on the sharp glass edges. Horses running amok, bellowing in fear, with no rider to guide them, and powder discharges and exploding, sending a shockwave, and I saw a single human cartwheel on fire, catapult 100 feet into the air. I took a turn on Baker Street and pounded by to see a herd of men throwing water from buckets at the fire, but it was getting singed and the flames scorched the sides of the cottages. "She's still too strong! We need to get the seawater!" one yelled. "Damn you, Felton! We mustn't leave it to burn! It's as hot as a smithy here!" "Jesus, Mother of Mary!" a fourth one yelled. "She smokes like a gallon sinking!" I quickly jumped down and raced to aid them. Maria, hold fast! Keep the horse in check!" "Oi!" Mary gave me a nod as Maria called. "Hal, come back!" "I can help!" I shouted as the flames screamed to the sky and the heat threatened to destroy me. Thank the merciful Lord for you, lad! Thank God!" One man covered in grey ash and black suit screamed. His forehead was bloody and his left arm had third-degree burns. I gripped the water hose like a giant coiling snake and lifted the funnel. "On three!" I yelped. "1, 2... But the flames pushed through the wind and the heat was so intense I was forced to drop to my knees and dunk under them as the other men did. But one man wasn't so lucky. The flames raced over him like opening an oven from the strong blowing winds. It burned his face as he screamed in agony. His entire skin melted off, his eyeballs bursted into juice, and his tongue charred coal black, and the wind died. The burned man fell to his knees, and the only thing left was no head. It had burned off completely, until only his lower jaw, with the bottom part of his teeth, were poking out, and his black tongue lolled over his chin. He toppled to his side, and I screamed as did the other men. "Felton's been torched like a wax candle!" one yelled. "Help me with this!" I screamed. But the other men were frightened and darted off down to the harbor. "Fucking cowards!" I screamed. I lifted the hose on my own and pushed the iron muzzle. Water spewed out fresh water and hit the fire in the building, but the water only extinguished a few logs. The fire then scorched and screamed like a devil, and the cottage tumbled half its wall with a boom. The hose then caught on fire and became hot in my hands, so I dropped it. I saw a few leather buckets filled with cold water and raced to them. This time Mary had joined me, leaving Maria on the horse. Together, we tried hauling the water into the fire, but it was no use. The water sizzled and evaporated. After we tried 10 houses, that ultimately fell to the flames. "It's no use! London is gone! We must make it back to the docks!" Mary screamed. I then heard a woman and child scream throughout the building ahead of me, and I peered up at the window. In the house of flames stood a woman clawing at the window, and in her arms was a child wailing. I turned to Mary. "We must help them! It is a child in there!" I yelled, but Mary gripped my arms and pulled me close. Her brunette hair, I could smell the perfume of cinnamon that I smelt in the garden this morning, matching the color of the fire blowing in the wind, and looked deep into my eyes. When I looked into her eyes, I felt home. I felt safe. "We cannot! If you enter that house, you will die! Think of Maria! Think of me! Think of your own life!" she pleaded. I panted and looked at the flames, scoring the window sills and hissing like a snake. I shook Mary off and charged through the burning door into the house, but the flames had gotten so intense that the stairs was blocked, and the red flames had destroyed and soaked every piece of furniture into soot. I could not get to them, and the smoke forced me to back out. I hurried back to Mary, who clutched my arms. They're trapped! I cannot get to them, the stairs are on fire! I'm sorry, Hal, but we must make it to the docks. I cannot lose you too! And I kissed her passionately. I love you dearly! I love you! I took one sad look as the flames took the child and mother as they fell from the window in a grapple of flames and smashed the cobble yards from us dead in ash and timber. As we hurried to the horse, 2 men gripping brandished flintlocks rushed at us in alarming speed. One punched the silver barrel into my head and cocked the trigger, while the other wrapped their arms around Mary and placed a knife at her side and wrapped his one hand around her neck to secure her. I froze and stared ahead behind her at the horse with Maria, watching the scene play, intently, tears swelling her face.
How?
She barked and the horse snorted.
He'll be alright, little pumpkin, I promise.
What the hell do you want, sir? I called to the man who had the flintlock aimed at my head while the buildings behind us went up in more flames. I could see the harbor just down the road. The two bandits were weather-beaten hard ruffians, with not a penny to their name. I could tell by their soulless eyes, rough hands and oily long hair and tattered poor clothes.
We be taking a stallion, boy. We need to get to Westminster in the utmost haste before the rest of the city burns and we are charcoal.
That horse is for me and my family. You cannot take it from us. He shoved the barrel into my head harder and forced me to my knees.
Ugh! Last chance, Fancy Pants. You better save the horse or you die.
I glared towards the man picking a knife into the side of Mary's dress. She stared in my eyes and shook her head, her brunette hair the same color as the burning embers. I knew if we gave them this horse, it would take us over an hour to flee on foot, and we would die from the smoke and flames either way.
What's it gonna be?
The man holding Mary yelled. We have money, you can take it. I lied, knowing it was just a bluff.
Oh, we'll be taking it. And perhaps that pretty little lassie, too.
He laughed. Once that response hit my ears, another notion set in. Okay. You may have the horse and the girl, I muttered. Just let me stand up to pull out the coins. Mary gave me a worried look and I gave her a trustful nod. I slowly stood up with a flintlock aimed at the back of my head.
Go on, lad!
He muffled his laugh. I judged the angle at which I was going to headbutt his arm. If I did it with too slow a force, I would fail and the bullet would surely pierce Mary. But if I jammed his arm with enough strength, the shock would create him to misfire upwards. With an instant, I headbutted the man's head, making the flintlock sway to the right over my shoulder. The shock of the blow made him misfire in a plume of smoke, and the ball shot clean past Mary and clean through the man holding the knife. The ball went through his forehead, and a spray of gore and brains splattered out behind him. He dropped his knife and fell straight back on his spine. My head buzzed, but with one movement I spun around and struggled with the flintlock in his hand as we fought for it. He punched my face and I took it, headbutting him again in the face and making me stumble back. Mary, throw the knife! I yelled as the man swung his arm, handling with the pistol at my face, but I ducked it barely, feeling it skim my hair, and I reached up and yanked the pistol out of his hand, it skewing across the cobbles. Mary picked the knife up and aimed her fingers up, flipping it from the handle to blade and aimed carefully. Now! I yelled as the bandit kicked my side and the wind squeezed from my mouth. Any time now, Miss Mary! How? Kick him! Maria squared from the horse. The man wrapped his arms around my neck, but before he could, I elbowed his shin from behind, shooting his arms out over my head. I spun around and grabbed his hair and slung him in front of me. A knife flew into his left eyeball and his head slagged instantly. A small drop of blood oozed out and I dropped him from the scruff of his mane. Mary stood there with her arm out, panting, wailing, and ran to me in a swirl of blue gowns. She flew into my arms and I caressed her cheek. I've never killed someone before, Hal. But oh my dear, oh my! It was sickening but also felt good. When he was attacking you, I cannot help but feel so angry, so mad, with what he planned to do with me if he had killed you. I wanted to kill him, he was so vile. You are mine forever, my love. We shall keep each other safe. He is gone. Indeed, my darling, I agree. You are mine as well. Me, you, and Maria. The buildings crashed down behind us in a sheet of sparks and coal. Come, we must depart to the harbor at once, I yelled. We hurried back to find Maria still there, thankfully, and I took the reins and galloped forward, hearing the rest of the cottage succumbing to the fire. We neared the docks, which were flooded still with people yelling and screaming to clamber onto the ships. It was madness. Mary tried to quiet Maria's wails of terror as the civilians of London went crazy mad with the heat, and fear of them dying as the fire was on our heels. I saw the northwest side near the Brookshire Garden, where me and Mary had sat this afternoon, was swelled in flames, the roses a charred bud and the bushes burning like tinder. I could see people throwing water buckets, dumping seawater from the ocean docks to try and put it out, but it was doing no good. As refugees poured out of the city, St. Paul's Cathedral was caught in flames. The acres of lead on the roof melted and poured down on the street like a river, and the great cathedral collapsed. Everything was gone. We rode into the docks while I watched sweaty Wade while I watched a sweaty Wade clerkman struggle to take notes with a singed quill to record all the people entering the ships in the harbor. I peered to my left to see the two men my father had met today in the Bombay house. Lord Beckett and Lord Hyde were staked through the anus and out the mouth with spears drove into the dirt at the docksides. Blood oozed from their mouths and their eyes were swarmed with flies. A rusty wooden sign hung by a string around both of their necks. "Fucking traitors," it read. I turned to Mary. "We're going to try and board a ship before they run out of room." We hopped off the horse and I tried to push past the people to the front where the old clerk struggled to write down the names as the people hurried past them. And some were jumping in the water, not caring if they could swim or not, and paddled to the rowboats that were being filed to the ships in the bay mooring. "Stay behind me!" I yelled, holding each of their hands. "I can't even write!" a clerk screamed. "Damn people!" I held onto Mary's hand as she was close to mine tightly through the crowd of panicked people. Maria hung to my shirt collar, but the people were so jam-packed I couldn't move. Suddenly, a woman elbowed me in the face, and I went out cold into the ground before having dark hands grasp me.